The sun had barely risen when Chinedu stood at the edge of his village, his small travel bag resting by his feet. The red earth beneath him felt familiar, grounding, almost as if it were pleading with him to stay. The village was waking slowly. Roosters crowed in the distance, women swept their compounds, and thin smoke rose from cooking fires. Everything felt normal, yet nothing was the same. Today, he was leaving. For years, Chinedu had dreamed of this moment. Lagos, the city everyone talked about in hushed tones and loud boasts. A place where men became rich, where poverty could be outrun, where dreams either came true or crushed you completely. He had listened to stories from returnees, some dressed in fine clothes, others silent and bitter. Still, he believed his story would be different. His mother stood beside him, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, her face lined with worry she tried hard to hide. She had not slept much the night before. Neither had he. She adjusted the strap of his bag for the third time, a mother's way of holding on when words were not enough. "Remember who you are," she said softly, "and remember this place. No matter where you go, this is home." Chinedu nodded, unable to trust his voice. His younger siblings hovered nearby, pretending to be brave. Emeka, his younger brother, looked at him with a mixture of admiration and fear. "You'll come back rich, right?" Emeka asked, trying to smile. Chinedu forced a grin. "I will come back better," he said, though at the time he believed that meant rich. Around them, villagers gathered. Some offered advice, others warnings. A few whispered among themselves. Envy, doubt, hope, all mixed together. Leaving the village was both a blessing and a gamble. Those who succeeded were celebrated. Those who failed were rarely spoken of. An old man stepped forward, leaning heavily on his walking stick. "The city is not kind," he said. "It gives with one hand and takes with two. Be careful, my son." Chinedu bowed respectfully. He had heard these warnings before, but youth has a way of believing it will beat the odds. The bus arrived in a cloud of dust, loud and impatient. This was it. The moment he had imagined so many times now felt frighteningly real. He hugged his mother tightly. She smelled of home, firewood smoke, soap, and comfort. She whispered a prayer under her breath, touching his forehead. As Chinedu climbed onto the bus, his heart pounded. The engine roared to life. Slowly, painfully, the bus pulled away. He watched the village fade, the houses shrinking, the people becoming dots, the baobab tree standing tall like a silent witness. A lump formed in his throat. "I will return," he whispered to himself. "I will not fail." But as the road stretched endlessly ahead, doubt crept in. He had no connections in Lagos, no guaranteed job, just hope, pride, and the heavy expectation of those he had left behind. The bus sped forward, carrying Chinedu toward a future unknown, one filled with promise, danger, and lessons he could never have imagined. Behind him lay home, ahead of him lay the city, and in that moment, Chinedu did not know that this journey would strip him of illusions, test his spirit, and teach him that the greatest wealth he would ever find was not money, but wisdom, love, and the courage to return home. Lagos did not welcome Chinedu gently. The moment the bus rolled into the city, he felt it. The noise, the heat, the movement, the pressure. Everything was loud. Horns blared endlessly, people shouted over one another, and the air was thick with dust, sweat, and ambition. Buildings rose high into the sky, crowding together as if competing for space. This was nothing like the quiet rhythm of the village. Chinedu clutched his small bag tightly as he stepped down from the bus. For a moment, he stood still, overwhelmed. Thousands of people moved around him, each one focused on their own destination, their own survival. No one noticed him. No one cared that he was new, confused, or afraid. "This is Lagos," he muttered to himself. He had been given an address by a distant acquaintance of his uncle, a man who had promised to help him settle. But when Chinedu finally found the place after hours of asking for directions and squeezing into overcrowded buses, the man was nowhere to be found. Neighbors shrugged. Some laughed. "He left 2 weeks ago," one woman said. "If you don't know anyone here, you better find your way fast." That night, Chinedu slept on a wooden bench outside a shop. The ground was hard, mosquitoes buzzed relentlessly, and fear sat heavy in his chest. Every sound made him flinch. He hugged his bag like a shield, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. By morning, hunger woke him. With the little money he had, Chinedu bought cheap bread and sachet water. It barely filled his stomach, but it gave him enough strength to keep moving. He began asking around for work. Any work. People barely listened. Some looked him up and down and waved him away. "Come back if you know someone," they said. "Leave here. We don't need anybody." Rejection followed rejection. By afternoon, sweat soaked his clothes, and his feet ached from walking. Just when despair threatened to overwhelm him, a small restaurant owner called out, "You there, can you wash plates?" Chinedu nodded eagerly. That evening he washed plates until his fingers wrinkled and his back burned. The pay was small, barely enough for food, but it felt like a miracle. That night, he slept inside the restaurant, curled on the floor near the kitchen. The days that followed blurred together. Chinedu worked wherever he could, washing dishes, carrying goods, running errands. He learned quickly that the city did not reward effort alone. It rewarded connections, cunning, and luck. Without those, survival itself was an achievement. Loneliness became his constant companion. In the village, greetings were warm, familiar. In the city, people passed each other like shadows. Everyone was too busy chasing something, money, status, survival, to notice anyone else. At night, Chinedu thought of home. He remembered his mother's cooking, the sound of laughter in the evenings, the comfort of being known. The city gave no such comfort. Here, he was invisible, just another young man trying not to disappear. One evening, as he sat on the curb counting the few coins he had earned, two men approached him. "You look new," one of them said. "We can help you make fast money." Chinedu hesitated. Something about their smiles felt wrong. He remembered the old man's warning back in the village. The city gives with one hand and takes with two. "I will think about it," he said carefully. The men scoffed and walked away, laughing. That night, Chinedu lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The city was teaching him lessons quickly, about trust, patience, and the price of desperation. He realized that dreams alone were not enough. The city demanded resilience, wisdom, and the ability to endure disappointment without losing oneself. Days turned into weeks. Chinedu sent his first message home, careful with his words. "I am fine," he wrote. "Work is small, but I am managing." He did not mention the hunger, the loneliness, or the nights spent on cold floors. Pride held his tongue. He did not want his family to worry. One evening, as rain poured heavily and flooded the streets, Chinedu stood under a leaking roof, watching the city struggle under the storm. Cars splashed through dirty water, people ran for cover, and the city kept moving, relentless, uncaring. In that moment, Chinedu understood something important. Lagos would not break for him. If he wanted to survive, he would have to adapt, endure, and grow tougher than his circumstances. He tightened his grip on his bag and asked quietly to himself, "I did not come this far to turn back." But deep in his heart, a question lingered, one he was not yet ready to answer. Was survival enough, or was there more to life than the struggle the city demanded? The city had not defeated him yet, but it had begun to reshape him, stripping away innocence, testing his resolve, and preparing him for lessons far harder than he had ever imagined. By the third month in Lagos, Chinedu no longer flinched at the sound of blaring horns or shouted insults. The city had begun to harden him. What once felt overwhelming now felt routine, though never easy. He woke before dawn every day. Sleep was short and restless, often interrupted by hunger or the noise of traffic. His body ached constantly, but he pushed through the pain because stopping meant falling behind, and in Lagos, falling behind meant disappearing. Work came in pieces. Some days he washed plates at the restaurant until his arms trembled. Other days he carried heavy loads in the market, his shoulders burning under sacks of rice and cartons of bottled water. Payment was never guaranteed. Sometimes he worked all day, only to be told, "Come back tomorrow." Tomorrow often never came. Still, he endured. Chinedu learned quickly to stretch little money. He ate once a day, sometimes less. Bread and sachet water became his closest companions. When hunger grew unbearable, he reminded himself why he had come: to lift his family, to escape the quiet hopelessness of village poverty. Yet Lagos tested him relentlessly. One afternoon, a man offered him a job helping with deliveries. The pay sounded fair, and Chinedu accepted eagerly. After 3 days of work, the man vanished. Phone switched off, office empty. Chinedu stood outside the locked door, his chest tight with anger and disbelief. It was his first major loss, and it hurt deeply. That night, he sat alone behind the restaurant, staring at the ground. For the first time, tears came. Silent tears, heavy with frustration. He felt foolish, betrayed, and tired beyond words. But even in that moment, he refused to give up. "I will learn," he whispered. "I will not let this city finish me." Loneliness pressed in harder with each passing week. In the village, evenings were filled with conversation and shared meals. In Lagos, nights were quiet and cold. People hurried past one another, too focused on survival to form connections. Chinedu missed being known, being seen. He wrote home occasionally, careful to hide the truth. "I'm working hard," he wrote. "Things will improve." His mother replied with prayers and encouragement. Reading her words strengthened him, but also deepened the ache in his chest. He could not bear to disappoint her. As months passed, Chinedu became sharper, more cautious. He learned to spot lies in people's eyes, to ask the right questions, to avoid deals that sounded too good. Survival was teaching him wisdom no classroom could offer. One evening, while waiting for a bus, he watched a young man collapse from exhaustion. People stepped around him, uninterested. Chinedu helped the man up, gave him water, and waited until he recovered. "Lagos no get mercy," the man said weakly. Chinedu nodded. He understood now. Despite everything, small victories kept him going. A kind shop owner allowed him to sleep inside during the rain. A driver paid him fairly for honest work. These moments reminded him that kindness still existed, even in the harshest places. Slowly, Chinedu began saving small amounts of money. It wasn't much, but it represented hope. Each naira was proof that he was surviving, adapting, becoming stronger. Yet with strength came fatigue. One night, as he lay awake listening to the distant roar of traffic, Chinedu wondered if this was what success looked like. Constant struggle, endless hustle, and quiet loneliness. He had imagined wealth and comfort, not survival as a daily battle. But he reminded himself that journeys were rarely what people expected. Growth often came wrapped in hardship. The city was not kind, but it was honest. It showed him who he was when stripped of comfort and support. And what he saw was a man who refused to quit. As dawn broke once more, Chinedu rose, stretched his aching limbs, and prepared for another day. The city had not defeated him yet. It had tested him, bruised him, and humbled him, but it had also shaped him. And unknown to him, this was only the beginning. Harder lessons awaited. Temptations would come. Mistakes would be made. And choices would soon confront him. Choices that would test not just his strength, but his integrity. For now, he survived, and in Lagos, survival itself was a victory. By the time Chinedu entered his second year in Lagos, survival had become routine. He no longer feared the city the way he once did, but familiarity brought a new danger: temptation. He had learned how to hustle honestly, how to stretch small money, how to endure rejection. Yet endurance alone did not erase his problems. He was still poor. He was still far from the success he had promised his family. And each time he spoke to his mother on the phone, her gentle voice asking, "Are you eating well?" the weight of guilt pressed harder on his chest. It was during one of those low moments that opportunity appeared, dressed like hope. The man's name was Kunle. He was confident, well-dressed, and spoke with assurance. They met at a roadside junction where Chinedu waited daily for work. "You look like a serious boy," Kunle said. "Not lazy. I like that." Chinedu listened cautiously. Kunle explained that he needed someone reliable to help with deliveries. Nothing illegal, just packages for clients. The pay was more than Chinedu earned in a week at the restaurant. Fast money, Kunle said casually. No stress. Chinedu hesitated. He remembered all the warnings, but desperation has a way of softening caution. He asked questions. Kunle answered smoothly, too smoothly. Still, Chinedu agreed. The first job went well. He delivered a package and received his payment instantly. The money felt heavy in his palm. Real, tangible progress. For the first time in months, he ate properly. He even sent a small amount home. Hope returned. The second job was bigger. The third, bigger still. Chinedu began to relax. Maybe this was his breakthrough. Maybe the city had finally smiled on him. Then came the mistake. One evening, Kunle handed him a sealed package and a bus fare. "Deliver this fast," he said. "Don't delay." Halfway through the journey, Chinedu was stopped by men claiming to be police officers. They questioned him aggressively, demanded to inspect the package, and accused him of carrying illegal goods. Fear gripped him. They demanded money to settle the matter. Chinedu panicked. He remembered stories of innocent people jailed without explanation. Trembling, he handed over most of his earnings. The men took the money and disappeared. When Chinedu finally reached the delivery point, Kunle was furious. "You're careless," he snapped. "This kind of thing can destroy business." Chinedu tried to explain, but Kunle waved him off and reduced his pay drastically. Days later, Kunle stopped answering his calls altogether. Just like that, the opportunity vanished. The loss cut deep. Not just the money, but the hope. Chinedu felt foolish, angry at himself, angry at the city, angry at the hunger that had pushed him to risk too much. That night, he sat alone under a dim streetlight, replaying every decision. He realized the truth he had avoided. Desperation had led him to compromise his judgment. For the first time, he questioned his path. What if I lose myself trying to survive? He wondered. The city did not pause for reflection. Bills still needed paying. Hunger still returned. But something inside Chinedu had shifted. The temptation had taught him a harsh lesson. Shortcuts often lead to longer pain. In the days that followed, he returned to honest work, though it paid less. Pride bruised, spirit shaken, he focused on staying clean. He avoided fast-talking men and too-good-to-be-true offers. He began writing in a small notebook, lessons the city was teaching him, about trust, about patience, about integrity. "Money gained without peace is not wealth," he wrote one night. Despite the setback, Chinedu noticed something new within himself. Wisdom. Painful, earned wisdom. He was no longer the naive boy who arrived in Lagos with blind hope. He was becoming a man who understood consequences, restraint, and self-respect. Yet the disappointment lingered. As months passed, exhaustion returned. Not physical exhaustion alone, but emotional weariness. He had endured. And still, success felt distant. One evening, after a long day of work, Chinedu stood on a bridge, watching traffic crawl endlessly below. Headlights stretched into the distance like unfulfilled promises. For a moment, a dangerous thought crossed his mind. What if I give up? But then he thought of home, of his mother's prayers, of the boy who left the village believing life could be better. He exhaled slowly. "I didn't come this far to lose myself," he said quietly. The city had tempted him and taught him. He had fallen, but he had learned. And though he did not yet realize it, these lessons were preparing him for a greater understanding, one that would soon pull his heart back toward home. By the third year in Lagos, Chinedu had changed in ways even he did not fully recognize. The fire that once burned brightly inside him, the hunger to conquer the city, to return home rich and admired, had dimmed into a quiet, steady ache. He was no longer chasing dreams blindly. He was surviving, learning, and enduring. But somewhere along the way, he had begun to ask himself a question that frightened him more than hunger ever had. Is this all there is? Each night, after long hours of work, Chinedu sat alone on his thin mattress, listening to the city breathe. The horns, the shouting, the distant laughter, sounds that once felt exciting, now felt hollow. Lagos no longer intimidated him, but it no longer inspired him either. He opened his small notebook often now. It had become his silent companion. In it, he wrote truths he could not speak aloud. I have learned how to survive. I have learned how people lie when they are desperate. I have learned how easy it is to lose yourself. One evening, hunger gnawed at him more fiercely than usual. He had spent the day working and earned barely enough for transport. He skipped dinner and lay down early, hoping sleep would silence the ache in his stomach. Instead, memories came. He remembered the smell of his mother's soup simmering over firewood, the way neighbors greeted each other warmly in the evenings, the laughter that filled the air when nothing much had happened, but everyone was together. Tears welled in his eyes. In the village, they did not have much, but they had each other. Here in the city, people had everything except time, peace, and connection. Chinedu realized something painful. He had not laughed freely in a very long time. He picked up his phone and scrolled through old messages. His mother's last voice note played softly. "We are praying for you. Come home whenever your heart is tired." That sentence struck him deeply. Come home whenever your heart is tired. His heart was tired, not weak, tired. Tired of pretending he was fine. Tired of measuring success only in money. Tired of living without roots. He thought about how carefully he had crafted his messages home, hiding the truth so as not to worry his family. He wondered if they could hear the exhaustion in his voice, despite his brave words. One afternoon, while sitting at a roadside canteen, Chinedu watched a group of laborers laughing loudly as they shared food. For a moment, he envied them, not because they had money, but because they had joy. That was when the truth settled in his chest. The city had taught him many things, but it could not give him peace. As the days passed, Chinedu found himself walking more slowly, thinking more deeply. He revisited places that had once symbolized hope. The restaurant where he first worked, the bench where he once slept, the junction where Kunle had approached him. Each place carried a lesson. He had survived scams. He had resisted corruption. He had endured loneliness. And yet, the victory felt incomplete. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Chinedu stood on a footbridge overlooking traffic. Cars crawled endlessly below, each one carrying someone chasing something. He whispered quietly, "What am I chasing now?" The answer came softly, honestly, home. That night, Chinedu made a decision, not sudden, not dramatic, but calm and certain. He would return, not because he had failed, but because he had learned enough to know what truly mattered. He would return without shame, without lies, with humility and wisdom. He knew the village might expect wealth. He knew some might whisper. But he also knew that his mother would not measure him by money. She would measure him by his presence, his integrity, and his heartbeat standing before her. Chinedu packed nothing that night. He simply sat and allowed the decision to settle inside him. For the first time in years, his chest felt light. The city outside continued its endless movement, unaware that it had lost another soul to reflection. Before sleeping, Chinedu wrote one final line in his notebook. "I left home to find wealth. I found wisdom instead. Now it is time to return." He lay down and slept deeply, not the restless sleep of survival, but the peaceful rest of someone who finally knew where they belonged. The road home still awaited him. Fear still lingered. Questions still remained. But one thing was clear. The journey that began with ambition was now guided by understanding. And soon, Chinedu would begin the hardest step of all, returning not with riches, but with truth. Once Chinedu made the decision to return home, the city seemed to change around him. Lagos was still loud, crowded, and restless, but he no longer felt trapped inside it. The weight that had pressed on his chest for years began to lift, replaced by a calm determination. For the first time since arriving in the city, he was no longer chasing something undefined. He knew exactly where he was going. Home. Yet the decision, though peaceful, was not easy. Fear crept in quietly during the nights. What would people say when they saw him return with nothing? Would the same villagers who had waved him off with hope now look at him with disappointment? Would his siblings still admire him? Would he feel like a failure standing on the same dusty road he once left with such confidence? These thoughts followed him as he prepared. Chinedu began selling what little he owned: extra clothes, a small radio. Things that once represented survival now became transport money. He calculated carefully, counting naira again and again, making sure he had enough to reach the village. Every decision felt heavy but purposeful. At work, he said quiet goodbyes to people who had unknowingly become part of his journey. The restaurant owner nodded when Chinedu told him he was leaving. "You survived here," the man said. "Not everybody does." Those words stayed with him. On his last evening in Lagos, Chinedu took a long walk through the streets that had shaped him. He passed the junction where he once slept on a bench, the market where he carried loads until his back screamed, the bridge where he had stood questioning his worth. Each place felt like a chapter closing. The city had not been kind, but it had been honest. It had stripped him down and rebuilt him quietly. And now it was time to leave. That night, Chinedu packed his bag slowly. It was lighter than when he arrived. Fewer clothes, fewer expectations. Inside, he placed his notebook carefully. It held more value than anything else he owned. Before dawn, he stepped outside. The air was cool, and the city was unusually quiet. A bus waited at the terminal, engine humming softly. As Chinedu climbed aboard, he felt his heart beat faster. This journey felt different. There was no excitement this time, only resolve. As the bus pulled away, Lagos faded behind him. Buildings gave way to smaller towns. Concrete softened into earth. The noise slowly thinned into silence. With every mile, Chinedu felt closer to himself. He watched the landscape change through the dusty window, memories flooding his mind. He remembered leaving with big dreams, promising to change everything. He wondered if the village had changed him too, even from afar. The bus stopped several times along the way. Vendors shouted prices. Travelers climbed in and out. Life moved forward, indifferent to individual journeys. At one stop, Chinedu shared food with an elderly man heading to his hometown. "Why are you returning?" the man asked. Chinedu paused, then answered honestly, "Because I learned what I needed to learn." The man smiled. "Then your journey was not a waste." As night fell, the bus continued on rougher roads. Chinedu slept lightly, dreaming of familiar faces, warm laughter, and the smell of home. When morning came, the village road appeared, narrow, dusty, and unmistakable. His heart pounded. This was it. No wealth, no gifts, no success stories polished for applause. Just him, older, wiser, and honest. As the bus slowed near the village entrance, Chinedu whispered a quiet prayer. "Let me be received as I am." The bus stopped. Chinedu stepped down onto the red earth he knew so well. The ground felt firm beneath his feet, grounding him instantly. The village stretched before him, unchanged in its simplicity. He inhaled deeply. Whatever awaited him, judgment or love, he would face it with courage. Because returning home, he now understood, was not an admission of failure. It was an act of truth. The bus slowed as it approached the familiar bend that marked the entrance to Chinedu's village. Dust rose into the air, drifting lazily like a curtain being drawn back on a long-forgotten stage. His heart thudded heavily in his chest. Every tree, every path, every smell felt painfully familiar. This was home. Children playing by the roadside stopped and stared. Some squinted, trying to recognize the stranger stepping down from the bus. Chinedu adjusted his bag and stood still for a moment, unsure whether to move forward or wait. Then a voice rang out. "Is that Chinedu?" His head snapped up. His mother stood near their compound, her wrapper loosely tied, her eyes fixed on him as if afraid he might disappear if she blinked. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then she ran. She did not ask questions. She did not look at his bag. She did not measure him with disappointment. She simply wrapped her arms around him tightly, crying openly. "My son," she whispered, "you are home." All the fear he had carried, of judgment, of shame, of being seen as a failure, dissolved in that embrace. He felt smaller suddenly, like a child again, safe and held. His siblings gathered around him, laughter mixing with tears. Emeka, no longer a boy, stared at him with awe. "You're thinner," he said quietly. Chinedu smiled faintly, but stronger. Word spread quickly. Villagers emerged from their homes, curiosity written on their faces. Chinedu felt their eyes on him, weighing him silently. He braced himself for whispers, for judgment, for pity. But none came. Instead, people nodded. Some greeted him warmly. Others smiled knowingly, as if they understood something he had only just begun to grasp. That evening, Chinedu sat with his family under the mango tree. The air was calm, the sky painted with soft orange light. Food was placed before him, simple, familiar, comforting. He ate slowly, savoring each bite like a gift. They asked him about the city, and for the first time, Chinedu did not lie. He spoke of hunger, of loneliness, of betrayal and mistakes, of temptation and fear. He spoke honestly, without shame, his voice steady. His mother listened quietly, her eyes never leaving his face. "You survived," she said when he finished. "That is enough." Later that night, elders invited Chinedu to sit under the baobab tree, the same place where he had once listened as a boy. Now he sat among them as a man. "You left with dreams," one elder said. "You returned with understanding. That is rare." Another nodded. "Many leave and never come back. Some return broken. You returned whole." Chinedu swallowed hard. He realized then that the village had not been waiting for his success. It had been waiting for him. Over the next days, Chinedu noticed something unexpected. Young boys followed him, listening eagerly as he shared stories of the city. Not stories of wealth, but of caution, of resilience, of choosing integrity when shortcuts beckoned. Even adults sought his advice. His journey, once a source of private shame, had become a lesson for others. One afternoon, as Chinedu walked through the village, a man approached him. "When you left," the man said, "my son wanted to go too. I was afraid. But now, hearing your story, I know what to teach him. Courage, honesty, and knowing when to return." Chinedu felt a warmth spread through him. That evening, he sat alone under the stars, reflecting on all he had feared. He had thought returning empty-handed would strip him of dignity. Instead, it had restored it. He understood now. The village did not measure worth in possessions. It measured it in character, endurance, and truth. As night deepened, Chinedu whispered softly, "I didn't fail." And for the first time, he believed it. Time passed gently after Chinedu's return, the way time does only in places where people are not chasing it. Days no longer rushed him. Mornings came with the sound of roosters and soft greetings from neighbors. Evenings ended with stories, laughter, and quiet reflection under the open sky. For the first time in years, Chinedu felt present, not running, not hiding, not pretending. He began helping where he could. He worked on farms, assisted traders, and taught younger boys simple lessons he had learned the hard way: how to speak with confidence, how to read people, how to avoid shortcuts that promise gold but deliver pain. He did not speak like a man who had conquered the city, but like one who had survived it. And people listened. One afternoon, as Chinedu repaired a broken fence with his uncle, he realized something that surprised him. He was respected, not because of money, but because of truth. His story carried weight because it was honest. His words mattered because they were earned. His mother watched him quietly, pride glowing in her eyes. "You returned a better man," she said one evening as they prepared food together. "That is more than riches." Those words stayed with him. Slowly, opportunities began to grow. Small, humble, but real. A cooperative group invited him to help manage records because he could read and write well. Younger villagers asked him to teach them what city life was truly like, not the version painted by dreams alone. Chinedu realized something powerful. The city had not made him rich, but it had given him knowledge. And knowledge, shared wisely, had value. One evening, sitting beneath the mango tree where his journey had begun, Chinedu opened his old notebook. The pages were worn, the ink faded in places, but the lessons remained clear. Wealth is not only what you bring home in your hands. Sometimes it is what you bring home in your heart. He smiled softly. Looking around the village, he saw boys laughing freely, elders sharing wisdom, mothers calling children in for supper. This was the life he had once underestimated, and now he understood its worth. Weeks later, a traveler passed through the village, a young man with bright eyes and restless ambition. He spoke excitedly about leaving for the city, about fast money and quick success. Chinedu listened patiently. When the young man finished, he asked, "Is it worth it?" Chinedu paused before answering. "Yes," he said carefully, "if you go to learn, not to lose yourself. And if you remember that coming back is not failure." The young man nodded, thoughtful. That night, as the moon hung high above the village, Chinedu lay outside, staring at the stars. He thought of the boy he once was, eager, proud, hungry for validation. He did not judge that boy anymore. He thanked him, because without that journey, he would never have understood what truly mattered. Chinedu had left his village chasing wealth. He returned carrying wisdom, humility, and peace. And in the end, those were the greatest riches of all. Moral of the story: not all journeys are meant to make you rich. Some are meant to make you wise. And returning home with truth is never failure.